Lucy Hardie to the podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here, and I can't wait to take a deep dive into your the creative life that you live and hear all about your incredible art and what led you on this amazing journey. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Steph. Happy to be here.
So I'd love to just start off by asking you to give a brief introduction of yourself and how you kind of came to being an artist that's based in Melbourne, but has also taught in places like Vienna, and that is not only an artist yourself, but supporting others to unleash their creativity.
Yeah, thank you. So I grew up in a creative family, so I've always been, since a child, I've always been drawing and painting and very creative, and it was always something that was that I was kind of naturally gifted at, I guess. But growing up in high school years, I sort of felt that wasn't necessarily an option to pursue being an artist. It was sort of that commonly held belief you can't earn a living being an artist. So it was always there as part of my study and one of my favourite subjects. And then it was after high school, I did a bit different study in various areas, and until I finally sort of made my way back to making art and really exploring that. So I had my first solo exhibition when I was 23, and this was as a self-taught artist, so I hadn't gone to uni to study fine arts, and it sold out on opening night. So it was just one of the most amazing experiences I'd ever had. And I remember going to sleep that night thinking, oh, this is the best night I've ever had. And yeah, it was after then that I decided to really give it a go and really pursue it, because I felt like it was something that others really appreciated, what I gave. And yeah, so it was really the beginning of starting to pursue that more seriously. So then I went back to university and I studied a Bachelor of Illustration, and that was like a mix between graphic arts and fine arts. And then after that, when I left uni, I got represented by a gallery in Melbourne, Port Jackson Press, and then just went on to keep exhibiting and went from there.
Amazing. And can you kind of talk us through, because it's a big leap to kind of be creating and then to have your first exhibition. How did that, can you remember, how did you kind of go, I'm going to back myself and have an exhibition?
Well, I'd been through a really transformative time in my early 20s. It was after a long-term relationship breakup, and my life really changed. I was kind of turned upside down. My world was kind of turned upside down. And I moved house, and just a massive transformation on a personally. And through that experience, I really went to art as my way of connecting and expressing myself. And so that was sort of my re-entry into art, if that made sense. It always been there, but I kind of left it to the wayside as I pursued other things. And so it's like these other aspects of my life or other structures of my life had sort of dropped away. And so then there was the art, and I was just focusing on that. And then I just, my sister said one day, I was showing her my work, and she said, Lou, it's time for the world to see your art. And I just committed to, okay, I'm going to go and look for a gallery and set up a solo show. So I just collated all my work together and went visiting various galleries in Melbourne and talking to people and showing them my work. And it was very nerve-wracking. I was extremely nervous. And then I found an artist-run gallery in Northcote in Melbourne. And yeah, she just was really supportive, the director of the gallery, and it went from there. So it was really my sister saying to me, Lou, it's time for the world to see your art. And I just felt very inspired to follow up on that.
That's so incredible to hear that, because so many people that I chat to say that it was someone else that, saw it in them and asked them to, or called them to be, or called them to step up and recognize the inner genius that really encouraged them to take the next step. And I just think, you know, that's so powerful. And yeah, it kind of makes me think, how much do we do that for others? You know, how much does the individual really understand the value of that in helping others reach their dreams? Because yeah, super powerful. And as you said, it sold out on the, did you say it sold out on before?
On the night that the show opened, it sold out, which
Amazing.
is pretty unusual.
Unheard of as a first.
Yeah,
Unreal.
just everyone from my life, from all over the years, they all came to opening night, and yeah, it was just amazing. Yeah, so that was the beginning, really.
So good. And just that, can you just share a little bit more about the feeling of, because I can't imagine anything more rewarding or fulfilling than actually producing art and it being acknowledged and appreciated in that way, and having all your family and friends. And what you paint the picture of the night for us and what it looked like.
Well, it was kind of like art had always, I'd kind of always been complimented for my skills in art over the years, but it had still sort of remained within the family and people who knew us. So it was just, oh, that's, you know, validated for that skill. And so, yeah, so building all this work for this solo show, I was just fully focused, and I wasn't thinking at all about how other people would respond. It was really just, I just need to get the work out there and just get this done. So I was really focused on the task at hand. And I wasn't even thinking about, oh, how are people going to receive this? Just, it's like I didn't have time. And so then I got to the opening, and then all these people showing up from my life and history, and strangers as well. And I think my high school art teacher came. And yeah, and so I was just, I'd done the work, and there I was just hanging out with all these people, and they were chatting about the work. And so I kind of got to see it through their eyes and hear their feedback, because I'd kind of lived with it for so long. So it was just an extraordinarily validating experience. It was kind of like the first time it had been seen by a wide audience, if that makes sense.
Amazing. Yeah, totally. And so for those that may not have seen your art, can you describe exactly what your style is and how you came to find that style?
Yeah, so it's much easier to show examples than describe. So I'll just give my website if people do want to have a look. It's lucyhardie.com. But I would describe my work. It's evolved over the years, but my most recent work has been detailed ink drawings on paper that take like hundreds of hours to create. And so build the layers up with very fine sort of stippling and hatching with the finest pen. And it combines elements of realism and elements of the fantastical or the imaginary, and focuses a lot on sort of portraiture that tell a story. So I describe it as evocative. That's kind of my aim, is that it evokes an experience in people. So it's less sort of a conceptual exploration. It's more that I want to evoke that sort of feeling and emotion of beauty and awe and mystery and wonderment. It has a bit of a dark edge as well, a little bit sort of gothic. So yeah. It's
And
black and white.
sorry, what was that?
Black and white, mainly.
Black and white. Yeah, they're absolutely incredible. Like, they're just so unbelievable. It's just, it is awe-inspiring. You just use the word awe, and it's just takes you to kind of to another place. And as I'm looking at your pictures, I'm kind of wondering how on earth you came to do that. Like, is it, where do you take your inspiration from, and how do you make them so realistic that the faces?
So initially I was really teaching myself the techniques of my favorite artists. So I would learn from books and copy their techniques in my own drawings. So I was very much inspired by the aesthetic of various artists that I followed. So some of those were Vali Myers. She also created these very fine ink drawings. and she was a Melbourne-based artist. And various artists like Harry Clark, who was an Irish stained glass artist and illustrator, Remedios Varo, who was a surrealist artist, and various artists. And I really just studied their techniques. So in a way, I sort of started with my inspirations and then developed my voice through that, or developed my technique through that. And then my own visual language sort of started to evolve over time, if that makes sense. So I wasn't necessarily 100% sure from the outset what my style was going to be. It just sort of grew naturally over time. And then as I looked back at it, I could more consciously understand what my work was about and then use that consciously in future works. Yeah. So it started out more as an unconscious process. It was only in hindsight that I could see what it was about.
That's really magical, because it's almost like you kind of got out of your own way and let it flow through you, and then the conscious mind kind of caught up to understand what was going on and how you could avail of it more and hone it in more, I suppose, to your style. So did it evolve a lot over time?
Yes. So it started out sort of very flat, colourful illustrations in kind of this Art Nouveau style. So it's just straight from my imagination. I didn't use any photo references or work from life at all. It was all just straight from my imagination. So it was very organic lines and very stylized. And then that just grew, and I started to use photo references, so refer to photos I'd taken of different people or sourced from various places, to bring in the more realistic elements, to bring a bit more depth into the work. Yeah.
Amazing. So the photos of I said photos because they look like photos, but they're not.
Yeah.
Your drawings, are they based on photo, that like a complete photo of that person that you copy with the ink, or is it parts? Or you said you kind of take inspiration from little bits and pieces.
The realistic elements in the work, which are primarily the bodies, the figures, the faces, hands, they're taken from photo reference. So sometimes I might have three photo references of a face or different faces, and then I kind of make my own face from that. So I use the references so I can get that realism, so I can get the shadows accurate and the light accurate. But just like applying makeup to a face, you can adjust things, and small adjustments will kind of change the entire face. So that's how I would kind of make my own face out of what I was referring to.
I don't quite know how to ask this question in a way that makes sense, but when I look at your art, it just, to me, it's kind of like it's so unique and so perfect in some ways that it's been almost channeled, or it's come from, there's something extra that is in your artwork. What's your kind of sense, or what's your understanding of how that happened? Like, do you feel like you're guided in what you create?
Well, that's a big question, isn't it?
It is.
I feel like sometimes I feel nervous talking about that kind of thing, because I feel like words are limiting in how I describe that, and it can be interpreted in so many different ways. Yeah, all I can say is the experience being in the studio is kind of it can just be like flow, or sometimes ecstatic even. And it's like I lose my mind. So time can go by like that. And it's like I'm sure lots of artists and creative people have talked about this. So I do feel very connected and very full of energy when I'm creating. And so there is that inspiration. And sometimes I'll start out with a clear idea, and it may just be a conceptual idea in my mind. And then as I'm going, it's just, of course, that's the next step. I'll put this in, and it's just obvious. The next step becomes obvious. So it definitely feels like a religious experience sometimes, even though I'm not religious. But
Yeah, I think that's an amazing way to capture it. I mean, there's so much in what you just said about losing your mind, you know, because that's what brings in sometimes the fear, doubts, and worries that limit all of us in whatever we're doing. So I think that is extremely powerful, you know, that sort of, and you're filled with energy. I can really relate to that. And also just mentioning that it's the next step becomes obvious. I just feel like in all of our lives, you know, all of our lives are a masterpiece, and sometimes, you know, we can get a little bit caught up, but it's just the next step and the next step and the next inspired
Yeah.
action or idea. You know, if you just kind of act on that, it then, you know, that is the path that shows you the path. And I think, you know, you've just captured that in an art piece, which I think is incredible. That, yeah, the next step kind of becomes known as your inflow and as your, and I just wanted to ask, is there anything in particular you kind of do or you used to do to get into flow, like to get out of your mind and into flow?
Yeah, for me, it's always been structure has been really supportive for me. So by that, I mean having a dedicated space for creating. So I've got my studio, which is just for making art. I have, you know, set times that I'm in the studio. So having these structures helps me, it kind of facilitates the flow for me. Um, Having my music on, cup of tea, snacks, chocolate. So I'm just there and I'm just in this beautiful space or this dedicated space, and then just doing the work. So I don't wait for inspiration. I'm very much, you know, I sit down at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. or, you know, and just start sketching, and because I feel like I have an abundance of ideas and inspiration, so I'm not really stuck for that. And it's just about sitting down and doing the work, and the inspiration comes. Yeah.
Unreal. And I'm super curious, when you're kind of creating, do you get different ideas that drop in, of, you know, unrelated ideas about different things, or is it very much kind of full focus on the creative piece?
Mm, yeah, sometimes there can be multiple things going on. So I could be sitting down and sketching, and as I'm just sketching, it's something about having the pencil to paper that allows for new ideas to come in. So if I were to just sit there and think, what am I going to draw? It just wouldn't happen so easily. So it's just the act of drawing and sort of scribbling subconscious things that ideas start to emerge. So I'll either write them down or just keep sketching new ideas. And then sometimes insights will come about various other areas in my life as well. Something about just being in that concentrated flow that allows for other sort of clarity to come in about other aspects of my life. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I love that, because it's almost like, you know, what I just heard from what you shared was in action. You know, in action, more ideas come. You're kind of,
Mm.
you know, you're not sitting there waiting for inspiration to come to you. You kind of start, and then, which, yeah, I think is a really key message.
Yeah,
Mm. Yeah.
absolutely. And more recently, I've had the experience of images just coming to me, just not fully formed, but I just have a flash of the whole image. I'll just be walking down the street, and suddenly I'll just have this flash of this image, and it's almost just responding to what's been given to me. I'm going, okay, yep, I'll do that. Whereas before, it used to be more that my mind was starting with the images, and then the inspiration would somehow fit into that. Whereas now it's like receiving the image and putting it onto paper.
That's
Yeah.
phenomenal. That's super magical, actually. It's yeah, that's phenomenal. That's a phenomenal thing to hear. And
Yeah.
I think, you know, we're all receiving messages all the time, and it's how much we can kind of hear them, you
Yeah.
know, and go with them.
Yeah.
And so are they all kind of related to, are they all a similar, do you get kind of a sense or a message with those, or is it just more of a visual representation?
It's a visual and it's a feeling. So it might be a simple image that comes to mind, but there'll just be that sense of power. And there's lots of negative connotations with power. But by that, I mean because the aim is always to help people feel moved and touched, and there's power in that. So it's kind of the image has a feeling of, I just get that feeling through the image. Yeah. So for me, the image, if it doesn't capture that, then it's not working. So even if it's well done or well sort of constructed, or a good idea, if it's not sort of moving and inspiring, or doesn't help people feel touched, and then I've got to keep working at it until it does, or change something. Yeah.
Amazing. And so for listeners that might be kind of just exploring their creativity or trying to find a style, a bit like myself at the moment, or, you know, really lit up by art, but don't quite know where to start. I know that you do one-on-one mentoring, which I think is totally brilliant, and so useful to people in that space to, you know, have someone who's been doing it for years help them find their feet and find their flow and their style. What would you kind of suggest to people that are in that space? And I'd love you to share a little bit about your mentoring program.
Yeah. So the mentoring I offer is one-on-one, and I started it during lockdown last year. So it's continued online via Zoom. And so it's working with individuals to support them in whatever creative goals they may have. So it varies depending on the person and where they're at in their skill levels, or where they want to go with their art. Some are more just wanting to enjoy it more, and others are sort of wanting to go more commercial. So what I would suggest for someone's starting out and exploring and wondering where to go, first of all, I'll just say that's completely natural and normal. And I've found over the years that in the beginning, it's very much about trying all these different things. And it's not about really having sort of focusing on one thing just yet. Often you've got to try multiple things before you sort of find what you're excited about. So, or themes within your experiments where you realize, oh, this is what I'm about. Like you said before we started, you were saying you've been exploring painting and how you love the light and the color in your imagery when you've got them all together. So that's exactly what starts to happen, is people start trying these different things and different styles inspired by different artists. And they think, oh, I don't know what I'm about because I love all these different things. But then later on, you'll find that as you put them together, there'll be these common threads. So it may be common sort of stylistic threads. So for example, a loose abstract style, or, a loose sort of abstract style and very colourful. That may be the obvious link. Or it could be a thematic link. So it could be different styles, but the theme is, could be playfulness and fun and joy, or it could be, exploring political issues, or, so you'll find that over time, the more you create and then bring that work together, you will find the common threads, which is you as an artist, your voice, and so it's just the time to create and to build that. In the beginning, you don't know who you are as an artist, don't know what you're doing, you're just doing what you like, and it becomes clearer over time. Yeah.
Do you have any stories that you can share with us of someone's journey that you've been working with and how you've seen them really step into their creativity?
Yeah. I would say it's more this theme overall that I found with students. So I teach illustration as well and do the mentoring. But what I've noticed is one thing that stands out is students who think they don't have a style or don't have a thing, or they've got to change, they've got to become more detail oriented, or they've got to loosen up. What I've found is that it's just helping them see that they already do have a style, and they already do have gifts. And it's about amplifying what they're strong at, not trying to reject that and try and be the opposite of what they are, So I'm a detail-oriented person. That's just how I'm wired. Whereas some people are very abstract and quick and will do a painting in, 2 hours. whereas I'll spend 6 hours drawing a cheek. So it's people who they're not aware that they already have something going on. And so what's exciting for me is helping them see what they're already strong at and the voice that they already have. Yeah.
Incredible. I saw you totally light up when you were talking about that. I'm sure you'd be a fantastic teacher, you know, being able to draw that out in people. And yeah, it's what we were talking about before. It's so powerful to be able to have someone else see that in you when you maybe don't necessarily see it in yourself yet. Yeah.
Yes. And then when they do see it, it's so amazing, because people can be so hard on themselves. They're going, oh, I should be like this. I keep doing it like this, you know, and when they go, oh, wow, oh my God, oh yeah, I see that now, and see something, a strength that can be really built on and optimized. And, you know, what's the next level to that? What's the next level to what you're naturally good at? Yeah.
Amazing. And what other trends have you seen? What else have you learned from your students?
Really good question. Oh, one very humbling thing has been, I haven't been expecting this, but as a teacher, it can be tempting to when students come to you with concepts, so initial sort of concept roughs or sketches, and they're telling you about their idea for their final piece, because often there's this process of you coming up with ideas and brainstorming, and then you communicate that to your lecturer, communicate that to me, and then you go on to more finalized roughs, so they may be color roughs, and then you create the final image. And it's been very humbling for me to realize that often these people, they have their vision and I just don't see it. So I regard myself as very, very imaginative, but when someone else is communicating their vision to me, I get an idea in my head, but it's not, I can't see what they see. And so often they'll come to me with the final image and I'll go, wow, I underestimated you, you know, or I would not have been able to see this that you were communicating to me. I just didn't get it fully. And so it's been really humbling to experience that and to remind myself that everyone has a vision, and that's in art and life. And I'm just not going to see that. Even though I'm very creative, I'm not going to see the vision you have for your life. And so it's about trusting in that. I don't know if that makes sense.
That totally makes sense. And it reminds me of a conversation I had with a friend this morning that I went for a walk with, because she asked me a question, you know, do you believe that when you've got a big vision, you should share it a lot with others first? And I thought that was such an interesting question. And I'm someone who shares with everybody, you know, as soon as I get an idea or a vision. And I used to do that a lot. And I found with a recent vision that I've had, my gut feeling has been to first consolidate it in my own mind and, you know, get a bit clearer on it. It's like a little seed that you kind of plant and is so delicate and can be trampled on by someone who doesn't quite see it the way you do. I think we kind of get these visions for a reason, and I kind of see it as, you know, God-given visions or direct from source, you know, where we're downloading these visions from somewhere and they're meant to come to us. You know, we've all got different functions and purposes in life. And so it was such an interesting question, and it totally relates to what you've just shared with us, because I think sometimes, you know, other people are not us, so they can't necessarily see our vision the way we see it or sense it even. So and I used to do this a lot with, you know, when I started Seven Women, the charity, ask people for advice outside of myself that I thought were wiser, you know, more lived experience, more, and they'd never been to Nepal, they'd never met the women that I met, they didn't quite have the same enthusiasm. And so I think sometimes, you know, for you to understand that and be aware of that with your students is so amazing, because it means that you can encourage them even if you don't see their vision, trusting that it will be perfect, you know, in the end outcome, and you can, you know, just to guide them and encourage them where you can. But it doesn't matter if you don't necessarily see their vision. It will evolve the way it does, I think, is a really interesting thing to mention.
Yeah, and it can be so easy as in that teacher role to just feel this natural urge to direct in certain ways, or to question what they're presenting. And so I'm just learning, it just happens, it keeps happening, and it's very humbling. It's like these people, these unassuming, and often artists are so quiet and shy, and my students tend to be, not always, and you just don't see what's going on inside and what they envisage. So it's exciting.
Amazing. And so one of the final questions is imposter syndrome. Like, I know a lot of people experience that and talk about that when they begin, and it was amazing to hear your kind of beginning journey of having the gallery and displaying your items. But when you had the idea to mentor and to teach, is that something that kind of came to you, or did you have any I know a lot of people kind of feel like, what do I have to teach, or how am I going to teach others? Is that something that affected you, or did it kind of come naturally?
It was definitely a challenge in the beginning. So I had the inspiration at the end when I was studying uni, my last final year, I had this inspiration to teach workshops. So I just started, and I remember it was a real challenge for me to explain to other people or out loud how I draw. It was never something I'd had to articulate in the past. So it was a process of just learning how to articulate that. And often I wouldn't know until I actually just demonstrated it for them, because they would say, how do you do this? And I go, just give me the pencil, let me do it. Okay, this is how I do it. I just didn't have the language for it. So that was a challenge. And also, I'm sure with, others who've done a certain thing for a long time, that maybe you don't realize how much you actually know. And I was like that too. I didn't think, what's this? How does this really make a difference? Or just, surely people know this, or this is easy, and then realizing actually, there's more that I know that I can pass on than I realize, because I feel like there's always more to learn. And so I'm like that. I see what's missing in my own skill set and my own knowledge. And sometimes that's at the expense of seeing what I actually have developed or do know.
And I love what you mentioned before about losing your mind to kind of let it flow through you. And I think art, especially in the beginning, maybe is very much about getting out of your own way to explore. And I just wanted to ask you about that as a teacher, as an art teacher, and a mentor in art. How have you seen the psychology kind of get into people's way, or then be able to kind of overcome that? What's the process of that, and how do you as a teacher really facilitate that happening?
Yeah, that is something that I have encountered in my running workshops, and also working with people one-on-one, just in a classroom setting, is, it can be easy you have a creative idea and you're inspired and you're excited to do it, and then you inevitably come up with roadblocks or sort of limitations in how you can interpret what's in your mind. And that can really stop people, and people go, I'm just done. I can't do this anymore. I've got to go. And so I'm realizing it's as much a psychological game as it is a technical game. And so what I even start my workshops by saying, this may likely happen. You'll come to a point where you feel stuck, that you don't have the skills, that it doesn't look right, and you just want to give up and go home. So I actually, say to people, expect this, and it's okay. It's part of the journey. So it's about helping people feel okay with the frustration or not knowing what to do next. And that in that, that's fine. You're frustrated. You don't know what to do. That's awesome. Just accept it. That's fine. Be frustrated. And then we can go from there. It's when people go, I shouldn't be feeling this. I shouldn't be stuck. It should be great. I should get what you're telling me. You're giving me easy instruction, but I'm not getting it right. and then they just give up. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, because art is such a tool for self-development as well. And I think preempting it, as you just said, is so valuable, because it allows people, gives permission for people to kind of go, okay, that's just the mind getting in the way. I'm going to, persist, because we all have those things come up. And I remember you reminded me of an art teacher in Sydney. We used to holiday in Manly, and there was an eccentric art teacher called Patrick, and I did a few classes with him, and he used to say, you got 30 seconds left to do that patch over there, and he'd pull the canvas from underneath me if I didn't do it in time.
Yeah.
And it was such an awakening for me, because I was like, oh my goodness, like the power of the mind, that made me lose my mind and just kind of go with it, just whatever, just kind of, because I had to rush, I wasn't critical and I wasn't judging myself. I was just doing it. And it was like, oh my goodness, I love this. He's just given me, the answer to control the thoughts in my mind. And if you can see thoughts as a tool to encourage yourself and to support yourself to actually go into it, then it's, why wouldn't you use them as a tool to support yourself if you have that awareness? So it's art's been so much pleasurable since, more pleasurable since that, because I think we all have that inner critic at different intensities and levels at different times, and it's just recognizing that is not going to serve us, and choosing to have different thoughts and supporting us. So I often think of Patrick, because I think art is an incredible tool for self-development and self-awareness, because it's such a metaphor for life in general, and what we allow to stop us or limit us from achieving our dreams. And as you said, first it comes as an inspired idea, or with that energy around it, and then the more you can kind of just recognize that, oh, okay, I'm feeling like this, but that's okay, keep going, or I'm going to choose not to let that limit me, the better.
Yes.
Mm.
Absolutely.
Right.
And everyone has their different recipe of creating. So the things that I've shared about, structure really helps facilitate my creating. For others, it may be something completely different. So I'm aware of that as well. Like you said, you get to choose your thoughts. You just choose something different. Whereas, every person will have their sort of success strategy. So for me, it's just, if I have a student really hard on themselves, it's acceptance. Just like, you're being hard on yourself. It's frustrating right now. That's okay. Instead of trying to stop them feel that, it's just acknowledge what's there, and then let's move on to the next thing. So whereas others they'll just change their focus. They'll just change their story, and they do it easily, or just push through, So everyone's different. Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Lucy. That's so interesting to hear, the story. I've never actually interviewed an artist before and heard the process in the way that you've shared with us. And I just think it's fascinating, because, I think we all, have our own individual ways of doing things. And sometimes we don't realize that everyone's hard on themselves, or it's just, a normal process of creating and stepping into that kind of flow and creating something. So it's very liberating to hear that others have that too, and also just the process of you stepping into being an artist in a society that doesn't always put massive value on art or creations. I just think I really admire you, actually, not only because your art is phenomenal, but also I can't think of anything more rewarding than actually creating something and then having people buy it, and having a sold out first exhibition. I mean, unbelievable. So thanks so much for sharing your journey, and I'm sure the listeners of this Inspiring Humans podcast will get so much out of it too.
Thank you, Steph. And if anyone does want to find out more about mentoring, or is interested, or has a friend who's looking for support, you can always jump on my website. All the information's there about what I offer and my history and what I bring. So people are welcome to get in touch if they want to.
Thanks a million.
Thanks, Steph.